Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Troy Robert, a.k.a. the old man, joined by the wonderful youngster, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. What's going on today, buddy?
Not too much. Get some Christmas gifts, of course, because I am the youngster, so I get hundreds and hundreds of presents still, Troy.
I didn't get you anything.
No,
I got you the gift of my presents 4 times a week. That's what I give you. I give you a gift every week, youngster.
That you do. I couldn't ask for more than just hearing your voice time after time after time, hour after hour after hour, every single week. Couldn't ask for more, Troy.
And then annoying text mixed in it when we're not recording. So, hey, yeah. Yeah.
No,
what a great gift I give you every week.
Can't ask for more, like I said.
So what's the best Christmas present you got this year?
Best Christmas present. I got a lot of food, which is always
Food's good.
Gift cards for food, which is always good. Best present. I can't think of it off the top of my head, to be honest with you. Got some shirts. Got a nice Ohio State shirt. That's a good one. I got a Boston Celtics shirt. But for this show, got a nice, fresh, new black Ohio State shirt. Not doing anything in the postseason, so to say, as far as the college football playoff goes. But next year and for years to come, I will be wearing that shirt loud and proud until they lose a game that they shouldn't, maybe to Iowa 35 points. But who knows? Regardless, I'll be wearing that Ohio State.
You can save those shirts for when we get our own radio show. That's what you can do on ESPN Radio, CBS Sports, Fox Sports, whoever's going to give us our own show. You can then wear them, and as we then, do little selfies and send out our in-studio pictures, you can be sporting your new shirts from the Christmas of 2017. We got a great show today, though, youngster. Big Ten Bowl preview. 8 teams, which is a good number of teams that have made the postseason from the Big Ten. Are they all great teams? No. We got some mediocre ones going on, playing in some bowls that are, like you and I talked about, way too many bowl games. But that's the way the NCAA works, so we're going to talk about it. We're not necessarily going to break the games down. We're not going to get all X's and O's on you and say this is what Iowa has to do, this is what Wisconsin has to do. We're going to talk about the teams themselves. They were rewarded with a bowl game. As Kevin mentioned, none of the teams made the national playoff. So it is just bowling. That's all it is. Teams in a bowl game. I'm sure there's some frustration in Ohio State, maybe a little in Wisconsin, but like I told you, youngster, I never expected Wisconsin to be in the national playoff, and you had even brought it up on the last show. Would I have signed up for the Orange Bowl against number 10 Miami at the beginning of the year in August? The answer is darn right I would have. So I'm actually okay with the Wisconsin bowl game. I thought they had a great year. I'm excited about their bowl game. We'll talk about that a little later in the show. But for a lot of these teams, Kevin, they are excited about going to a bowl game. Some of them, maybe a little disappointed. But for others, hey, we're building something. We got something to look forward to. Now we can use the bowl game as that stepping stone into next year. I'm going to turn it over to you, youngster, as we always do. We're going to go right down the slate of games. Take it over.
Yeah, just going chronologically here. The first bowl game, actually, we are recording this on December 27th, which is a Wednesday. And tonight is, as we're recording this, the first Big Ten bowl game. As far as a Big Ten team being represented, Iowa plays Boston College in the new Era Pinstripe Bowl. I was gonna say the time of the game, but by the time we're done with this show, this game will actually have already started. So forget that. Regardless, Iowa plays Boston College, and for Iowa, you're in a bowl game, which you expect if you're an Iowa fan. There is no coolness about making this bowl game. I'm going to be frank, and I'm always, just crystal clear on what I mean and say. And honestly, if you ask an Iowa fan, hey, 7-5, new Era Pinstripe Bowl against Boston College, That's what you're going to at the end of the year. That's your record at the end of the year, 4-5 in Big Ten play. What would an Iowa fan say? I mean, they wouldn't be ecstatic. They wouldn't be happy. You're hoping as an Iowa fan, I think, to get a 10-win season. You're hoping to play in the Big Ten title game, win your division. Whether that's an undefeated season going, to number 2 in the country and the college football playoff, probably not. That's probably too high for Iowa expectations. But 7-5, probably too low. Probably a bit of a disappointment this year. 4-5 in Big Ten play, losing games to Michigan State, who you didn't think you would lose to. Losing to Northwestern in overtime hurts. Losing to Purdue by 9 hurts. So in general, I mean, this Iowa team, it's to beat Boston College in this game only means so much. You were hoping for more. The last thing I have, and I'm going to do this with each team, is just kind of give a little brief summary as to what this team has going forward into 2018. The quarterback, Nathan Stanley, is a sophomore. Running backs, you have Akrum Wadley and James Butler. They're both seniors. Iowa typically doesn't throw the ball all over the field. You're losing your top 2 running backs. The third and fourth guys are freshmen. They'll step up, obviously. You got a couple 3-stars in the 2018 class, which, by the way, I'm going to be mentioning these recruiting things. And these guys are already signed. The first ever college football early signing period already took place last week. After our show, I believe we recorded our last show. And so that early signing period is over. That was just a 3-day window. Now I think it's late January when kids again can sign. But most of these teams have signed the majority of their players. There's still like 3 or 4 guys who have said they've committed to these schools but haven't actually signed their name on the piece of paper. But most of these guys, 15, 20 of these guys for each of these teams have signed already. So that early signing period just kind of helps jumpstart the recruiting period and gets kids onto their college campus potentially earlier if you finish high school a semester early. That's now a possibility more often than it was in the past. But so for Iowa, they got the number 1 player in Iowa, which is a 4-star defensive end. That's the only 4-star they got, but it is a 4-star, and half of the Big Ten teams don't get 4 stars. To only get 1 4-star is what it is. Make what you want of recruiting rankings. But in general, this team is young outside of the running backs they lost. Losing Josie Jewell as a linebacker is absolutely going to hurt. He's on, basically any All-American list you can think of. First team All-Big Ten for sure, without it, being in front of my face as I talk about this. But Iowa in general is a younger team, but filling the running back position is going to be interesting, I guess, going forward into next season.
Well, Kevin, you mentioned a couple things here, so I want to circle back to the record, 7-5, and yeah, you're right. Does Iowa care about hoisting the Pinstripe Championship trophy by playing another mediocre team in Boston College? I don't think so. That's not one of the trophies that you like to have in the old trophy case. You know what I'm saying? But nonetheless, this is one of those games that I was talking about where Iowa can use this to maybe take a look at some of these young players, get some more reps for these young guys. They went out a 4-5 Big Ten record. So my question that I have, Kirk Ferentz been there quite a while. Is the message getting stale? And I'm not saying this because I hate on Iowa, but you're looking at a division, honestly, Kevin, I'll say this, that's weak right now. Right. We talk about the Big Ten and we say, well, this might be the best conference in college football, but most of that is hovering over in the other division. Wisconsin, Paul Chryst has done a great job. He's put down his foundation. He's got his program in place. He's going to go recruit what he needs to recruit. Wisconsin's going to be that 8, 9, 10 win team every year. 8 might be a disappointment for Wisconsin because you're looking at what they play in that division. So you're looking at Wisconsin probably near the top because Paul Chryst has done what he was going to do. I can't be happier as a Badger fan. My point here with Iowa is, though, is Ferentz on the right track to put Iowa near the top of that division? in a division where it only takes one or two more good recruiting classes and a foundation and a system to be near the top of that division. There's some solid teams in there. Don't get me wrong. But it's a weak division if you're looking at the Big Ten as a whole. And so when you're looking at all those teams below Wisconsin, who's going to separate themselves? Who's going to step up to that Wisconsin level? Honestly, Kevin, we thought it was going to be Nebraska this year, and look what happened there. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
But we talked about the hiring, and we really think that Frost is going to put some things in place. We put a poll out on Twitter, so those listening, make sure you follow us on Twitter, at TroyRobert967, at KidCunny, KIDCUNI. Those are our personal Twitters, but make sure you follow the show handle that we have, at YoungsterOldMan. And I'll tell you what, Kevin, a lot of people think he's going to turn this around in 2 years. The majority of people think in 2 years they think he can contend for a Big Ten title. That is some confidence in a coach after a very porous year at Nebraska as far as the team is concerned.
Yeah.
But I'm going to throw it back to you and get your thoughts on Ferentz, Kevin. Is he just riding on his laurels right now? Is he riding on his past success? Because I have not seen anything out of Iowa the last couple of years that tells me, okay, I can give you a pass because you're young. Well, you're young, which means that you had a couple of bad recruiting classes in there. And it only takes one or two bad recruiting classes to set you back. Should that blame be put on Ferentz? I want to get your thoughts.
I guess as far as recruiting and where Iowa should be, I mean, Iowa was 7th in Big Ten recruiting for 2018. Not that it's finalized, but most of it's finalized by now. In general, and to go, I guess, with recruiting, I mean, the 35th nationally, that's fairly average for a Power 5 school. Wisconsin, for example, is actually 38, but that's a school that recruits 3 stars to its system perfectly and knows what they're doing.
But Kevin, 38 for Wisconsin, that's like that's where they always are.
Right.
That's where Wisconsin recruits, and they turn those 3 stars into solid players because they've got coaches that develop players. I'm okay with Wisconsin being in that 30 to 40 range. My point here is, has Ferentz put together a program to develop players and compete in that division? That's really where I'm going with this, and it does start with recruiting, but if you're not going to get the 4 stars, and you mentioned it, 4 stars are not like the norm in Big Ten. You've got to have a staff that can find talent in a 3-star and get the most potential out of them. Doesn't mean they're going to play in the NFL, but means they can be very good college football players. Just had to throw that in there.
No, that's the thing, is you have Nebraska with the number 42 class. You have Minnesota with the number 30 class, but does Nebraska really know what it wants to do? You bring in Scott Frost. Obviously, it's a whole different system and regime, and you've got a number of different things going on there with basically a complete turnover of its coaching staff for the most part. But so in general, I mean, does Minnesota know exactly what it wants? Well, PJ Fleck's a first-year coach going into his 2nd year. This is his first full year recruiting. And Minnesota's getting the number 30 class. I think that's solid if you're a Minnesota fan. But again, if you don't really build a culture and know what you're doing on the recruiting trails, then it's just kind of all for nothing. Like Iowa, staying in the 30s. And, churning out 7-5, 8-4 seasons doesn't really mean anything. If you're Wisconsin and you're in the 30s, yes, you'd obviously rather be in the top 10 with Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State. But if you're going to be in the 30s, at least recruit perfectly for your system. And like you said, Troy, turn those 3-star guys into potential number 10 overall picks, potential 4-star, 5-star playing-esque guys that can get you to 12-0 seasons going into the Big Ten championship. I mean, this Wisconsin team this year is not built on 4-star, 5-star guys whatsoever, and yet they ran the freaking table. So, I mean, they were 1 win away from being in the college football playoff, guaranteed, basically. So you can live with these number 35, number 38, number 40 recruiting classes if you have a system and a coaching staff who coaches up these players. Michigan State's done it. This number 20 right now, Michigan State is number 25 class, for example, and that's really high for Mark D'Antonio. That might be his best class ever if it finishes this way. There might have been one other class that's higher ranked than that, but in general, Michigan State's around the 30s as well, but they have the coaching staff. D'Antonio knows what he's doing. That's a program that's well put together, and they know what they're doing. Wisconsin's the same exact way. So you get the occasional 11-1, 12-1, 10-2 seasons, win the Big Ten once in a while, and you're appearing in the Rose Bowl. And if you win the Big Ten with obviously no losses or one loss, typically you'll be in the college football playoff. So in general, I mean, you can live with being the number 35 class if you're Iowa, but like you said, is the message getting stale? Maybe it is. I'm not a huge Kirk Ferentz lover. I think Iowa is your typical 8-4 team who is an above-average Big Ten team who once in a while gets to 10 wins, and that's fine. Maybe that's all Iowa should expect, but at the same time, why can't they be Wisconsin? Why can't they be Michigan State and knock on the door more often than not? I would put Wisconsin and Michigan State's program above Iowa, and I think Iowa should be where Michigan State and Wisconsin are, realistically. I don't think there's much of a difference there in terms of talent and coaching staff and ability. I don't think those programs are all different, but as far as how they're built right now and of recent past, Wisconsin and Michigan State are ahead of Iowa in terms of what the program is realistically going forward, even though Iowa should be on their tier. They're not, to me. So that's a problem. And so Kirk Ferentz is signed through the 2026 season. Obviously, he can be bought out like any other coach.
Yeah, he got that big deal, Kevin, when the NFL was knocking on his door, and he cashed in.
Yeah.
I know you're at home in front of the computer. Can you pull up his overall record? Again, I'm not an Iowa hater. I'm really not. But when I look at college football, you're looking at a coach that has been mediocre at best. And then you look at Michigan State, fired D'Antonio. I mean, come on now. So what's the difference between Iowa and Michigan State? I mean, it's a booster program. I understand that from both schools. But are the boosters okay with what's going on at 7-5, 8-4 every year? I mean, I will tell you this, youngster. If Wisconsin fell into that realm of 8-4 and 7-5 every year, I would not be happy with Paul Chryst.
Right.
I believe that Wisconsin team should win 9 games every year. Every year, especially the division they're in. Now, occasionally will he dip and lose 4 games and be 8-4? Yeah, because a lot of it will depend on when you're playing the other division. Like this year, there was no Penn State in the regular season. There was no Ohio State in the regular season. Those are tough games. But when you look at the division, Wisconsin should be 1 or 2 in that division, in my mind, every year from here on out. That's as a fan. Because I'm looking at where they're playing in what division. They should win that division or be second. Occasionally, okay, they'll have that down year, have an injury or 2 injuries, and that can really hurt. And maybe they falter. But as a fan, my expectations of that Badger team, 9 wins every year. So that means 9-3 every year, youngster. I don't think I'm setting the bar too high for what Chryst has shown he can do. So when you look at Iowa and they reward Ferentz with this big, long contract because, we don't want to lose him to the NFL. Go to the NFL. I don't care because you're a mediocre college coach. That's all you are. And if you're an Iowa fan listening in and you support him, then find me on Twitter and knock me alongside the head and tell me why he's a good coach.
Yeah.
What have they done, Kevin? Hopefully by the time I ranted, you've pulled up his record.
Yeah. Yeah, I have. In general, I mean, here's his time at Iowa, 142-97, which is fine. But look at Big Ten play, 86-68. I mean, you're basically going 8-6 every 14 Big Ten games. That's barely above average. In the Big Ten, which again, like you said, Troy, over these last, 7 years, they've been in the quote-unquote weaker division. So, I mean, over the last 7 years, let me read you their records. 7-6, 4-8, 8-5, 7-6. They had 12-2, Rose Bowl. That's when he got his contract extension. 2 years ago, 8-5. This year, 7-5. I mean, there's one season in the last 7 where they've won at least 9 games. Otherwise, they've been 8-5 or worse. And they also have not won a single bowl game in the last 7 years. Take winning bowl games, losing bowl games, what it is, but you're losing bowl games over the last 7 years. You're not getting even 9-win seasons, except for one 3 years ago. You got to the Rose Bowl. That's great, obviously. But outside of that, I mean, the last time this team finished outside of that Rose Bowl appearance with one Big Ten loss or none, I mean, so they've lost twice, at least in the Big Ten, every single year outside of that Rose Bowl year since 2005. I mean, that's when Kirk Ferentz really made his presence known. It was 2002, 11-2 Orange Bowl. 2003, 10-3 Outback Bowl. 2004, 10-2 Capital One. But you're winning 11 games, 10 games. That's understandable. Since then, 7-5, 6-7, 6-6, 9-4, 11-2, 8-5, 7-6, 4-8, 8-5, 7-6, 12-2, 8-5, 7-5. I mean, you're getting the occasional year here and there of winning 10, 11 games. But, I mean, since 2005, they've had 2 years of at least 10 wins. I mean, that's a 12-year stretch, 12, 13 years, and in 2 of them, you get to 10 wins or more. I don't know. I don't know if that's good enough to have a contract up until 2026. That's my opinion.
And the question again is, why can't they be where Wisconsin at? So now I'm going to have you flip a full Paul Chryst record up.
Yes, I can.
I told you at the beginning we're going to, hey, 8 bowl games. This show will take an hour. This is going long because every one of these things, you said you got little points. Well, with every game too, which I didn't tell you, I've got little points too about the team and where they're going to. And this was probably the biggest one. So I'll tell the fans, I really have been on this about Iowa and Kirk Ferentz and all the love that he gets when I hear about other coaches like D'Antonio on the hot seat. For what? D'Antonio, in my mind, is 10 times a better coach than Ferentz. And Ferentz has done nothing at Iowa, Kevin, that tells me that he is going to get that team consistently to 10 wins. You just basically proved my point. If you're an Iowa fan, you want to be 7-5, 8-4, fine. More power to you. More power to you. But I'll tell you what, if it was Paul Chryst and that record started going down, I would not be happy. That must have given you enough time to pull Paul Chryst's short record up at Wisconsin.
Absolutely. At Pitt, he went 6-7, 7-6, 6-6. That's at Pitt. Now, Wisconsin 2015 goes 10-3. 2016, 11-3. This year, 12-1. 6-2 in the Big Ten, 7-2 in the Big Ten, 9-0 in the Big Ten, 22-4 overall in the Big Ten. Holiday Bowl.
So why can't Iowa be on that same level, Kevin?
Right.
If you're an Iowa fan, why do you not want that? I did that for a reason, not because I'm a Wisconsin homer. I did it because Wisconsin is dominating that division. That's who you want to be like. And honestly, Iowa can be like. Every team in that division can be like Wisconsin, Kevin. You just mentioned it. What was it, 38th best recruiting class? And that's probably really good. They're probably popping champagne down at Camp Randall. They really probably are. They're not going to go get these 4-star recruits. They got recruits for their system. They got a great coaching staff. That's what it takes. Iowa fans, if you're out there listening, you need a great coaching staff, and you don't have one right now. I'm done with Iowa, Kevin. You can move on.
I love it. So next, also December 27th, the Foster Farms Bowl. Purdue plays Arizona. This one will actually start at 8:30 p.m., but this nobody's going to be listening to this within a couple hours of us getting done with the show. Unfortunately, that's just how it works. But regardless,
you don't have this one DVR'd up, the Foster Farms Bowl.
Oh well, I'm actually working. I'm at work during this, so I'll be watching absolutely. Purdue versus Arizona. I'll be literally working a Big Ten shift, so I'll be doing some Purdue Arizona stuff. With Purdue, though, I guess I will say this about Purdue. Purdue has the number 13 Big Ten recruiting class for 2018. But I guess before getting into that, in general, quarterback system with Purdue, that's kind of the main thing going forward. Elijah Sindelar is a sophomore, David Bloffa Jr. It's been a 2-quarterback system all year long. To me, Troy, I don't like it. And in college, it can work. I mean, you have guys like Chris Leak and Tim Tebow winning national championships. So can it work? Absolutely. And Ohio State a few years ago, down to their number 3 quarterback. He comes in and it works. That's not a true 2-quarterback system, but regardless, you can make it work in college. But to me, if you're Purdue and you're running a 2-quarterback system, as opposed to running Chris Leak, who goes to the NFL, Tim Tebow goes to the NFL, that's a little different, in my opinion. If you're Purdue running a 2-quarterback system, your ceiling to me is only so high. Purdue, can they be a Wisconsin? I think so. I think Indiana gives them the same types of players that Wisconsin gives Wisconsin as far as the states go. In general, I don't think Wisconsin has this huge recruiting advantage being in Wisconsin as opposed to Purdue and where they are. That's just me. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But, I mean, we've said it, and even Troy said it as a Badgers fan, number 38 recruiting class, that's probably pretty good. And Purdue, they're, I think, 50 this year, which is certainly not good for a Power 5 school. But in general, you're getting a bunch of 3-stars just like Wisconsin is. That's, at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. So you get a 3-star athlete. That's your top prospect, a 6'5" wide receiver, a 3-star pro-style quarterback.
Kevin, I'm going to jump in here real quick about your rankings. Anything outside of the top 20, you basically got 3 stars. So
right.
To me, you're 50th or 38th. It's basically like you just said, the same kids. Anything outside of the top 20, you've got the same makeup, and do you have the right kids?
Yeah.
Are you out there fishing with a blindfold on and just signing kids that say they want to come to your school because, oh my, I need a recruit? Or are you actually getting guys that are going to fit into your system and guys that you see potential that will work in your system? That's the difference between a class that's going to come in at 38 and 50, and we're not going to know that for 2 years. But to me, anything outside the top 20 that you're talking about, basically the same type recruiting class. Now, if you're coming in at like 80th, okay, well then, okay, maybe there's a problem. But anything in that 38, 50 range, same type kids. Had to throw that out there.
Yeah, I would agree. You're going to get Wisconsin as the number 38 ranked recruiting class on one site. You'll see them as 45 on another. You'll see them 27 as another. You'll see Purdue's 50 on one site. You'll see them 42 on one site. So, I mean, take with it what it is. But like you said, they're getting basically the same kind of kids. In general, Purdue's season, again, that quarterback system thing to me, I want to get your take on that. But to review Purdue, their top 2 running backs are both juniors. They're coming back. You lose your top wide receiver. You lose your top tackler on defense. You're losing some guys, but offensively you're returning a lot. And again, you're getting a bunch of 3-star guys to fill in the gaps. Purdue in general was close in a lot of games. Michigan wasn't necessarily close, but Wisconsin was close. Rutgers, they lost, was close. Nebraska was close. Northwestern was close. You lose all those games. You lose to Louisville to open the season. That was a touchdown football game. Nobody thought Purdue should do that. Purdue also beat Missouri by 32 points at Missouri. They were knocking on the door for, to me, an 8-4 season. A couple games go their way. They don't lose to Rutgers by 2 points. You don't lose to Nebraska by 1 point. You're 8-4. I mean, it very simply could have been an 8-4 year. Very happy for Purdue fans. But in the end, things just didn't go their way in a few games. And so you're looking at 6-6. You make a bowl game. If you're Purdue and you win a bowl game, that means something to you, I think. But at the same time also, which is interesting to me, and I hadn't thought about it until I was literally just talking now, was that since these recruiting classes are basically done and over with, what does it really mean to win a bowl game? You're getting the best of the rest, I guess, so to say. If you're in a recruiting war and you can say, hey, we're Purdue and we at least got to a bowl game, as opposed to someone looking at, say, Rutgers, and Rutgers doesn't get to a bowl game, that's like, hey, which school should I choose? You don't have many of those kids left because a lot of these kids have signed already in this early signing period. So I think that affects recruiting somewhat because it used to mean something for some schools to say, hey, we went to this bowl game, we won, we beat this school that you're also interested in potentially. Now, if you're an early signee, which most of these kids are now, during this 3-day window, which, again, took place last week, kind of winning your bowl game doesn't necessarily mean anything. Maybe getting to a bowl game as opposed to a team not, that can mean something. But winning a bowl game doesn't really mean, I don't think, potentially as much as it did back then for winning a recruit here and there. I just think that's kind of interesting, I guess, going forward in the college football world. But that's Purdue. I mean, 2-quarterback system. What do you think of that, Troy? And this team was close to an 8-4 season, in my opinion, but didn't have the ball kind of go their way in a couple games, so to say. Offensively next year, I expect bigger things, but again, a 2-quarterback system, I don't necessarily love it.
Well, 6-6 for Purdue is probably where I expected them. Middle of the pack, average team. So yeah. I'm going to talk about what I think of Purdue, and then I'll answer your question. So Purdue, you look at them, I'll give them this. They were a tough out. They played tough. They've got some young guys. They're going to be returning pieces. The problem at Purdue, and the problem's always been at Purdue, is defense. In the Big Ten, I'll put it this way. You mentioned, and we talked about recruiting quarterbacks in the Big Ten. You're not getting 4- or 5-star pro-style ready quarterbacks. They're just not coming to the Big Ten, nor will they ever probably. So you need to build a defense that can be able to shut down the run and then have decent cornerback play so when they do have to pass, that you can put the game away. And Purdue defensively struggled many times against very mediocre offenses. They struggled against the Wisconsin offense. Now, I will say this, though. The Wisconsin offense and that running game and that offensive line are dominant. So my point here, not just for Purdue, but for a lot of these middle-of-the-pack teams that are 6-6, 7-5, 8-4, how do you get better? You get better up front on defense, and you learn how to stop the run. Because in the Big Ten, if you can run the ball, Wisconsin has proven with below-average quarterback play, they can go undefeated. That's pretty amazing in my book, Kevin. I joked with you. Give me a quarterback at Wisconsin, and you've got a national championship team with the way that they can run the ball and the defense that they have. So Purdue, to me, offensively, I'm okay. I'll talk about the 2-quarterback thing. But offensively, at some point in the Big Ten, you've got to play defense.
Yeah.
Name a team to me, Kevin, that's been successful in the Big Ten in recent years that is just running and gunning and doesn't play good defense. Doesn't happen.
That's
You've
the
got
Big
to
12.
play. Yeah, that's the Big 12. That's the big boys down there that are offensively fit. The Big Ten, if you're a coach in the Big Ten and you play in the Big Ten, you've got to play defense. It's a defensive conference, and I think that's why I like it so much. Maybe I'm just an old man. Maybe I'm an old school guy. But if you can play great defense, you can get by with a mediocre offense. Now, if you want to try and be that high-gunning team and change the scope of the Big Ten, by all means, try. And this is going to get to answer your question. You're not doing it with 2 quarterbacks. You've got to find a quarterback that can wing the ball all over the field, and you've got to put guys around him. It doesn't matter if you have 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks. What do you have around you? At some point, though, you have to establish the run for play action. Otherwise, teams will just pin their ears back, a.k.a. Ohio State. Probably best defensive line in the Big Ten. If they've got you in a passing situation, you have no resemblance of play action, they will put their hand in the ground, they will beat your offensive line, and they will punish your quarterback. So it doesn't matter how many you got. But if Purdue wants to be an offensive juggernaut, and I air quote that because it always seems like Purdue is kind of like that redheaded stepchild that is out there trying to figure this out offensively with the quarterback in a passing style offense, which is fine. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
But the last time it was successful was when a guy named Drew Brees was there. And how long ago was that? 15 years ago? So if that's what you want to do, then do it. But go get the guys to make it work. But still, at some point, you've got to stop the other team. Because I don't remember the last time there's been a Big Ten champion that goes out there and wins games 42-35. And Purdue can't play defense. So that's my take on Purdue.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly, and I don't have an answer for your question. The last time a team ran and run and gun, you play the run and gun, but I guess if you're saying it that way, it's kind of ran and gun. I don't know. In any case, to throw the ball over the field in the Big Ten when it's 20 degrees and you're playing a lot of your Big Ten games when it's super cold and you don't have a defense to back you, it's different when you're playing games in Oklahoma and Texas in the Big 12 and it's constantly 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees for your games. It's just different. There's a reason why top quarterbacks are in the South/West, primarily the West, because you can throw the ball 30, 40, 50 times a game and have perfect weather for a lot of your games. And so it's just different. It's just made for quarterbacks. And the Big Ten is somewhat made for offensive, defensive lines, running backs, quarterbacks who can build off play action. You want guys who can extend plays, obviously, like in any level, but in general, like you said, Troy, it's about up front, and it's about who can win the line of scrimmage. And if you're in a passing down against Ohio State, good luck. And if you're trying to run the ball against a team like Wisconsin, just right up the gut, good luck. I mean, that's how those teams are built, is to stop that. So for Purdue, I mean, if you want to run and gun and throw the ball all over the field, that's fine. But having two quarterbacks, getting a three-star quarterback here and there, just to me, it's not going to work. I mean, you can make it work, I think. I think Ohio State wants to play up-tempo and no huddle and get the ball snapped every 15 seconds and score 50 points. I think Ohio State does want to do that, and they recruit top tight ends who can catch the ball and top halfbacks who can split out wide and that become first-round picks in the NFL draft. And they recruit to be an up-tempo offense, but at the same time you're recruiting top 10 at their position guy, centers and guards and tackles, and top 5 running backs in the recruiting classes. So it's just different for Ohio State. But that's a team that wants to run and gun, and you're getting top flight defensive ends to stop the pass, and it's just different with Ohio State. But no, I mean, there is no team in the Big Ten that just flies up and down the field with a mediocre defense and wins 10 games. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Even when Iowa gets really good and has 10, 11 win games or 10, 11 win seasons, they can run the ball, they can play defense, just like Michigan State when they're winning the Big Ten, 2, 3 out of 4 years. During that stretch they had under D'Antonio, that's a team that can run the ball, that can play defense. You have good quarterback play, but you're not throwing the ball 40 times a game. That's just not how it works. So to me, I mean, that's all I have on Purdue as well, Troy. Otherwise, I will get into Michigan State.
Go right ahead. Move on in to Fire D'Antonio. Fire D'Antonio.
Fire D'Antonio is always that's always the motto for Michigan State fans, it seems like. But for Michigan State, December 28th is their bowl game. They are playing Washington State in the Holiday Bowl. That's going to be an interesting game. But again, how many recruits are you going to win over now that most are signed? But from a bowl perspective, it's certainly one of the better bowl games. You want to talk about a team in Washington State who likes to throw the ball all over the field. Luke Falk, I believe, is their quarterback. I don't have the Washington State stuff right in front of my face, but I believe Luke Falk is their quarterback. They throw the ball at least 40 times a game. It'll be interesting to see that style being played in San Diego, by the way, for the Holiday Bowl against Michigan State. You're going to see a lot of Washington State fans. Michigan State, I'm sure, will travel well to San Diego this time of year. But in general, it should be a very interesting matchup for Michigan State this year. This was supposed to be a young team who, I mean, after its loss to Notre Dame, I remember doing the show with you, Troy, and they were 2-1. They had beaten Western Michigan by 2 scores. They had just lost to Notre Dame by 20. And we were saying Michigan State might not make a bowl game this year. And the words of Fire D'Antonio could come out. And would it be ridiculous? Yes. But it would be 2 straight years of not even making a bowl game. Has D'Antonio maybe lost a little bit? Can he kind of reboot it into what it once was? It'll be interesting to see, because they did play Iowa next. They had to go to Michigan 2 weeks from then. They had to go to Minnesota. They had to go to Northwestern. They had to play Penn State, Ohio State. All those games were on their schedule still, and they beat Iowa. They went to Michigan and won. They beat Northwestern. They lost in triple overtime. They beat Penn State. I mean, Michigan State went 9-3 in a year again, where after even the first 3 weeks, we were like, this team might finish 4-8, 5-7, 6-6 at best. And this team goes 9-3, and they're in the Holiday Bowl. I mean, that's a bowl game that everyone knows is the Holiday Bowl. It's not some ridiculous bowl game. I'm not even going to make up a name. But the Holiday Bowl is a legitimate bowl, 2 top 20 teams playing each other. This was an unbelievable job by Mark D'Antonio.
It's a legitimate bowl for you millennials, not for us old folk. It ain't no legitimate bowl to the old folk, youngster. For the millennials like you grew up with the Holiday Bowl. This was a bowl game added so the old folk like me, no. I'll say it's a legitimate bowl because it's one of the top tier ones. You got to have a little better record to get in. But it's still, to me, not a legitimate bowl. No, not in my book. I had to interrupt you there.
Legitimate bowl in the sense that you're getting probably 2 top 25 teams every year in it. Legitimate bowl for Ohio State to be in? No. For Alabama to be in? No. You're pissed off to be in the Holiday Bowl. But if you're going 9-3 in the Pac-12, going 9-3 in the Big Ten, those are 2 quality teams playing. At least I can say that much. But in general, a super young team that Michigan State had. They were not supposed to go 9-3. Quarterback, Brian Lewerke, a sophomore. Top 2 running backs are juniors. Top 3 wide receivers are going to be back. You return a lot of your defensive guys. This is a young team this year. The one thing I guess was interesting to me is that this team went 9-3, had a surprise year. And L.J. Scott, who was supposed to be their workhorse back, was coming into his junior year, averaged 5.4 yards per carry last year, has a down year, averages 4.3 yards per carry this year, and they still go 9-3. You've got a couple good running backs in Michigan State, but L.J. Scott had the worst year of his career at Michigan State to this point. His freshman season was better than this past year. But so in general, I mean, they also got 4 stars. As far as recruits go, I mentioned that before, that this could be Michigan State's best recruiting class ever. And that may be why, is that the expectations were fairly low. And yet you saw win after win after win after win, 9 wins, playing in the Holiday Bowl against a top 20 team. I think people are buying in like, yep, Michigan State's back. That was just a 1-year blip on the radar where you fall to...
Did they really go anywhere, youngster? To you and I, they didn't go anywhere. We were honest, though. We thought with that tough schedule and a young team, it could be a long season.
Yep.
But you and I were in D'Antonio's corner 100% all the way because he's a great coach. He's a great I'm gonna preface that, though. He's a great college coach. I think D'Antonio is meant to coach in college. There's a reason his recruiting class is where it's at. It's because kids that want to perform at the highest level and get the most out of their potential have seen what he has done. Now, it's not all D'Antonio either, youngster. We mentioned it with Paul Christ in Wisconsin. It's the staff you've assembled. D'Antonio has his staff in place, a staff that's going to go out, find kids, and coach them up. No way in the world did I think this team would win 9 games.
No.
We didn't know if they'd make a bowl game. We thought maybe 5 wins was the max. So who gets the credit? Yeah, the players do. But everyone on that Michigan State staff, and this is kind of my wrap-up as I interrupted you, so you don't have to come back to me at the end. All I wanted to say about Michigan State, this staff took a group of young kids and made them believe, coached them up. Did they hit their ceiling? Maybe. But even if they hit their ceiling and they plateau and they play at the level they did this year, they're already one of the better teams in the Big Ten next year.
Yeah.
As long as there's no fall off. And I don't see that happening. I don't see kids coming back and regressing to the point where they're 5-7, and they're probably going to get better. Another year under their belt, young kids, and we've talked about this, Kevin. There's a huge maturity difference between a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old. These kids are going to be a year older, a year stronger, another year in the system. I expect pretty big things for Michigan State next year. I'm not saying national championship, not saying national playoff. Would another 9-10 win season be in the books? Yeah, very well could be. That's all I got on Michigan State.
Yeah, I'm curious to look right now as to what their 2018 schedule looks like. I'm trying to pull it up right now as fast as I can because I'm curious to see what I think of it. Just right off the top of my head, starting off, I guess you see at Penn State, that's going to be difficult. But they're going to regress a little bit, in my opinion. You get Michigan at home. You get Ohio State at home. Otherwise, non-conference-wise, they should win those games. This should be a team, again, probably looking at 9 wins at the least. This is not some bruising, difficult schedule that they have next year. If you pull an upset like at Penn State or Ohio State at home,
and D'Antonio proved this year, youngster, that it doesn't matter how hard the schedule is. His kids are going to go play.
Yeah.
So now, once and for all, and I'm not going to say this ever again. Well, maybe next year in the Big Ten show. Get off the fire D'Antonio thing. Just get off of it. The grass is not greener on the other side, Michigan State fans. Michigan State boosters, look what you have and applaud what he did. But I'm also going to say this. If you were one of those that said, fire D'Antonio, get off the bandwagon. Get off of it now. Don't even cheer for him. The guy's a great coach. I'm done.
Yeah. Enough said there. Again, they got 4 stars. This is the last thing I'll bring up. You got a 4-star cornerback, 4-star tight end, 4-star athlete, 4-star quarterback. I think Michigan State is headed back in the right direction. That was truly a one-year thing where things just didn't go their way on the field. Maybe they would have won a couple games in general, but had a little bad luck going here and there, a couple games. There are a number of teams. The Oakland Raiders in the NFL can tell you about luck. You win 7 of 8 one-score possession games a year ago if you're the Raiders, and you lose basically all of them this year. That just happens. That doesn't mean the Raiders got so much worse this year. They just had a few close games, and basically almost all their close games go their way one year, didn't go their way in another year. That just happens sometimes. Michigan State a year ago, it just happened where you lost a ton of guys. You were a super young team, and nothing went your way. That's okay. That doesn't mean D'Antonio sucks. He should be fired. Give the guy 1 year to return things back to where it was, and he does it. Moving on, Northwestern. December 29th in the Music City Bowl. That's another bowl I've heard of, Troy. I won't say that's a legitimate bowl, but at least it's one I've heard of. Northwestern plays Kentucky. Again, nothing you can really take from winning, losing this game. Should they beat Kentucky in general? Sure. But again, Music City Bowl for Northwestern only means so much. If you're Northwestern, I think you're trying to win your division and compete at the top of that division and play in a Big Ten championship game. I think that's a legitimate thought and legitimate opportunity for a Pat Fitzgerald-led team at Northwestern. I don't think that's insane to say. I don't expect Northwestern to post a 12-0 season like Wisconsin does. But at the same time, again, do I think they can push Wisconsin? Do I think they can have a year where they finish 11-1? I think it's possible. I don't expect it, but I think it's possible. This year in general for Northwestern, You look at their schedule, and they start the year 2-3, and then they win their next 7. So this is a team going in the right direction. But like I said, with close games, they won 3 games back-to-back, all in overtime. So turn those 3 games around, you're 6-6. I mean, it's that close from saying, hey, this Northwestern team had a good year, 9-3, to 6-6, barely made a bowl game. Is Pat Fitzgerald that great? Right now, 7-game winning streak, playing in a game you have at least heard of, Northwestern looks good. So a bounce of a football in a couple games, it can change a lot. Iowa was a tip pass away from beating both Penn State and Ohio State this year. You can look at things that way if you're an Iowa fan. So a lot of games are close. It's a 12-game season. A lot of things can happen in it. But in general, I think Fitzgerald's a good coach. I like where Northwestern's at as a whole. Going forward for 2018, before I pass it to you, Troy, for Northwestern, your quarterback's a junior, Clayton Thorson. You're losing your franchise, your program's top running back in Justin Jackson. He's a senior. I'm sure he will be in the NFL. Next year, next guy up is a freshman. Your top 2 wide receivers return, though. You're keeping a few defensive guys. One guy who led your team in tackles this past year. You get the number 2 ranked player in Illinois who's a 4-star defensive end. It's the only 4-star Northwestern got, but Northwestern is not going to live and die by 4 stars. But so in general, you get to pluck a couple good 3-stars. You recruit a couple 3-star running backs to replace Jackson. I think Northwestern is going to be just fine going forward. I guess for a question for you, Troy, is do you agree with my assessment that it's possible for Northwestern to go 10-2, even 11-1 one year, and appear in a Big Ten championship game and at least have a shot at winning the Big Ten? I don't put them of the same prestige as obviously Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State right now, and even Wisconsin. But to have a breakthrough year, I don't think is necessarily unacceptable and impossible. And to push a team in a Big Ten championship game, I think Northwestern can do it. It's just not something I expect.
No, I wouldn't expect it every year, Kevin. But I'll say this again. Every team in that division, you'll even hear me when we get to Indiana, why can't you be like Wisconsin? Seriously. You're not probably going to get to the realms of a Penn State, a Michigan, and Ohio State. But I don't think Wisconsin's there either, not even at 12-1. Wisconsin has done it right, and I know people say, well, you're from Wisconsin, you're a Badger fan. I'm not talking right now as a fan. I'm talking at a guy that co-hosts Go Big or Go Home. Wisconsin has done it right. They got the coach they need. He assembled a staff that he needs, and he recruits guys that fit his system, and that's how he's going to play. You don't have to sit down and break down film for 2 days on Wisconsin. They are going to smash mouth you, and I'll say it this way, they're going to bully you. That's what they want to do, and 12 times this year they were better than the other team at bullying them. But there was nothing fancy. So all these teams that try to get fancy and say they need to do this and throw this wrinkle into it. Why? You've got a coach in Fitzgerald that I like. Here's my thing with Northwestern moving forward, Kevin. What will their identity be? You mentioned losing the top program's running back. Are they going to get to that and say, we're going to be a running team that plays good defense? And I think that's kind of where they wanted to go this year. Or are they going to mix it up a little bit, be a little more 50-50, 60-40? I don't know. I think the big question for Northwestern, what do they want to do moving forward? Because like many teams in the Big Ten, Kevin, Northwestern is on the fence when it comes to identity. Where are you going to go, and what are you doing with your recruiting classes? What do you want to accomplish year in and year out? So I'll say it now since we're on Northwestern, and I know that we probably went a little longer than we've wanted to so far with a couple games left. But these teams that are moving forward, Kevin, it's just like, well, we're going to change our identity this year. We're going to change it this year. We're going to change it this year. In my mind, and I go back to my days of coaching when I recruited. You have to know what you're going to do all the time, because this year's recruiting class impacts next year's recruiting class. And that class, even this year's recruiting class, impacts 2 years from now. You're Northwestern. You're not having guys that are 2 and done. They're not playing 2 years and going pro. These guys will be juniors when you're recruiting in 2 years. So you have to have a system in place. So if next year you're going to change it up and then recruit different, that's going to set you back. And that's what I see happening, Kevin, with a lot of these middle-of-the-pack teams. When they go out and recruit, then on the fly, well, they're going to change how they recruit 2 years from now. Well, that impacts this year's class. So that's my problem with all these mediocre teams. And that's why I keep saying anybody in this division can be the likes of Wisconsin if you stick to a recruiting plan and an identity. But a lot of these teams in that division, Kevin, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have an identity. And they don't know where they want to go. So when they recruit, they're trying to get the best 3 stars out there. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pan out in your program, because you don't know what you're doing in your program. That's all I got.
Yeah, I think coaches in general, if you ask them, hey, what do you want to do? What does your type of football team look like? Almost every coach has their answer. But at the same time, like you said, do you go out and try and get the best 3-star you possibly can as opposed to a 2-star who might fit your program better? I don't know if that's the case for Indiana and Maryland and Nebraska as of a few years ago, and Minnesota and Illinois. I don't know how those coaches exactly recruit, but it seems like, hey, what's Rutgers' identity? I don't know. What's Indiana's identity? I don't know. What's Maryland's identity? I don't know. I mean, you can say Maryland's got some cool, interesting quarterbacks who can do things with their legs, and Indiana's got a quarterback. They actually had a couple quarterbacks play this year, so they're not 100% sure what they want to do at quarterback, in my opinion. Rutgers, their identity, I don't know. It just in general, I mean, even Ohio State and their identity, I mean, it's basically get a bunch of athletes and get a bunch of guys on the defensive line who can rush after a passer, and it's just a bunch of 5 and 4 stars running all over the field and being fast.
That's different there, Kevin. Youngster, that's different at Ohio State.
Right.
Because they do get top-tier athletes.
Right.
So you can adjust and you can mold what you're going to do based on the athletic talent. Wisconsin can't do that.
Right.
They can't. They have to go out and they have to recruit the big burly guys and good running backs. And I'm not even talking about 4-star running backs.
Right.
I'm talking about running backs that are going to be able to run behind a good offensive line and understand a system. So Ohio State recruiting, even a Penn State right now where they're at and what Franklin has done there. And we'll talk about Penn State in a little bit. Franklin's established almost the Penn State allure again. So recruiting to him got a lot easier because of what he's done. But when you're in Ohio State, and we'll touch on them in a little bit, when you're landing 4 or 5 stars because they want to play at Ohio State, you don't have to have this so-called, pound 'em identity or we're going to pass. They don't have to have that set in stone. They've got to have a plan. What am I going to do with this 5-star? The 5-star has an ego. He has an ego, and he wants to know how he's going to be the superstar. That's a different recruiting than a 3-star that wants to play college football. That's my take there.
Yeah. Jonathan Taylor, for example, the number 24 running back in his class, the number 371st best player in his class, and yet he wins Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, and he's a freshman. So Wisconsin knows what they're doing. Obviously, any team, Purdue, could recruit Jonathan Taylor, and he would not have the same impact at Purdue as he would have had at Wisconsin. Part of that, obviously, is offensive line, but it's all kind of built up by the coaching staff and their identity and what they do and what they look for in certain running backs. It's all calculated. You're not just going out and saying, hey, we'll take the number 24 ranked running back for Wisconsin. They'll be great. Well, not necessarily. You're going to have higher-ranked guys than Taylor even play running back at Wisconsin, and they're not going to have the same impact he had. It's based on skill set. It's based on identity and what works with your offensive line and play calling. Running backs are all different. They're not all exactly built the same and great at running in between the tackles or bouncing it outside. They're not all the same. You have to recruit even within the same position differently. Wisconsin, you know their identity. Northwestern, it's a little up in the air. And again, you're going to have a senior quarterback next year in Thorson, and you're going to have a sophomore running back who got, I think it was a little over 100 yards rushing this year because you gave every handoff to Justin Jackson. So, does Northwestern throw the ball more than they run it next year? It's possible. And could that set them back a little bit? Yeah, I think that's possible as well. I'll move on to the next team, next game, also on December 29th. Again, we're going chronologically here. Ohio State plays on December 29th. They play in the Cotton Bowl, which, again, is December 29th, against USC. It's going to be a great game in terms of football watching and talent on the field and seeing Sam Darnold at USC, seeing JT Barrett in his final game, seeing a bunch of NFL athletes out on the field. It's going to be a great game. Breaking down the game, again, who really cares about who wins this game? It's going to be fun to watch regardless. And if Ohio State loses by 20, they lose by 20, and the next day I wake up and I feel just fine. That's the Cotton Bowl for you, and that's the Cotton Bowl. I mean, that's a bowl, Troy, that even you would say is one of those legitimate bowl games.
Now, that is a legitimate bowl game.
There we go.
Cotton Bowl. It's prestigious. But I want to just mention a thing here, and then you can move on to the next game, because I don't have much to say about Ohio State, because you already said what I was going to say. Who cares who wins this game? For Ohio State, this is a disappointment. And I shouldn't make light of that. It's the Cotton Bowl. So you went to a really good bowl game. But at Ohio State, the expectation is national championship. I'm not going to say they're not going to go out and play, but really, at this point, does it matter if they add another win to their season? Now, no. I was an athlete, and you want to win. You don't want to lose. But as a fan, I want them to win, and I want them to play well. But for Urban Meyer, Kevin, you mentioned it. The early signing period is done, over. Yeah, there might be some guys out there, though, that are still looming. So I think it's different. I do think it's different for one of these top-tier programs where there is a 4-star sitting out there that hasn't committed, or that has Ohio State, or has an Alabama, or a USC, or some of those schools on his list. There's some still out there that are being courted by a lot of schools, and they just don't know where they want to go yet. So it might be important. But at the end of the day, I don't care who wins this game. I just think it's going to be a good football game. Two good football teams playing each other. And I don't want to say I don't care who wins. It's a Big Ten show. I want the Big Ten to win, of course. Of course I want the Big Ten to win all their bowl games. But when you look at Ohio State, for them, I think the most valuable time has been Urban Meyer to get that coaching with the guys that are going to have to step up next year to make a national championship run. Yeah, he's loyal to his seniors and his upperclassmen and the guys that are going pro. But for Urban Meyer to have that extended practice time now that this game really does not mean anything, you know that he used every minute of that legal practice time to really take a good look. So he's molding that team for next year. That's all I have on Ohio State.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll finish with this. You're losing JT Barrett for next year. Dwayne Haskins has shown while Barrett's been hurt, he's a freshman, that he's even a better thrower than JT Barrett is, which is weird to say because of the records that Barrett holds. But a freshman on the roster right now has a better arm than JT Barrett. No question about it. There's actually a number of quarterbacks on that team's roster that they have. Tate Martell redshirted. And he's been used as a scout quarterback like Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. I mean, he's got a world of potential, and he hasn't played it down at Ohio State yet. So that team is doing just fine at quarterback. They actually lost a quarterback who was quote-unquote committed to Ohio State. I think he ended up at Florida, I believe. Emory Jones was his name. So Ohio State, I mean, they're fine at quarterback going forward. J.K. Dobbins was a freshman this year. I mean, if it wasn't for Jonathan Taylor, you would have heard a lot more about J.K. Dobbins. In the Big Ten, he was phenomenal. Mike Weber, he was supposed to be the team's leading rusher this year. He's a sophomore. Now I guess he's taking a back seat to Dobbins, but that's a 1-2 punch next year that's going to be dynamic. Your top 6 wide receivers at Ohio State also return. So this team's going to have a lot of offensive firepower going for it, and potentially an offense that will be a better throwing offense as long as Haskins is the quarterback for next year, which that would be my assumption. But if Tate Martell does beat him in camp going into next year, you're going to have a playmaking quarterback in Martell leading that offense. You lose your top tight end if you're Ohio State, but again, your top 6 receivers return. And going to recruiting, number 2 class in the country, couple 5-stars, 16 different 4-stars. That's what it is at Ohio State. You got the number 1 tight end in the country to replace your top tight end leaving. You've got a top running back / wide receiver, Percy Harvin mold type guy coming in, number 2 linebacker, number 5 safety, number 8 safety, number 1 center, number 12 wideout, number 4 running back. I mean, the list just goes on for these top-tier teams. As far as talent goes, this team loses a few talented guys to the draft and a few talented seniors every year, but you reload. And I'm excited to see, as an Ohio State fan, what the future holds, especially with a guy like Haskins, if he does win the job, what this team can do when they can throw the ball downfield more efficiently than they have these past couple years with Barrett, to be honest. So that's all I have on Ohio State before I move on to the next team. If there's anything else you have, Troy.
Now, move on to Bucky Badger.
We're getting there. Penn State, as far as chronological goes, they play 4 hours earlier than Wisconsin, so I have Penn State next on my list. So, Penn State Fiesta Bowl against number 11 Washington. That, again, is going to be a very fun football game. As to who wins, that's the only, I guess, other thing I wanted to mention is you're going to have recruits with Ohio State and USC still kind of recruiting them, like you said, Troy. You're going to have a 4-star out there who's looking at both schools probably. And whoever wins, and if you have a dominant team in that game, that winning team might win that recruit. But 1 recruit for USC, 1 recruit for Ohio State, how much does it really mean? But so Penn State with Washington in the Fiesta Bowl, December 30th, 4 o'clock Eastern on ESPN for those listening before December 30th. Penn State, Washington, Penn State, I guess in general this year, if you're Penn State, you were hoping for kind of the world because you had Saquon Barkley, you had a great defense, you have Trace McSorley. You were hoping to probably run the table. If you lose 1 game, hopefully win your division, move on to the Big Ten title game and beat an undefeated Wisconsin team and put yourself in the playoff. And unfortunately for Penn State, they lost a couple games. So at Ohio State, at Michigan State was a killer, and even at Ohio State. The first 5 minutes of that game, Penn State was up, I believe it was 14-0. They had complete control in the first few minutes, and then it was all Ohio State. So to let that game slip away, lose by 1, that hurts. The following week, go to Michigan State, lose that game by a field goal, that obviously kills you. So if you're Penn State, 10-2 Fiesta Bowl, it sounds good, but expectations before I get into what they have going for them, next year, Troy, in general, like Ohio State, honestly. Ohio State playing USC in a bowl game, it's cool, but in the end, you're not winning a national championship, so it's a disappointment. Penn State this year, 10-2, not playing in the college football playoff, it's a disappointment. I guess, Troy, am I wrong in that thinking?
No, any fan you talk to, they don't even care about this bowl game. I shouldn't say any. The fans I've talked to, they don't even know what bowl game they're playing in. When they were eliminated from the National College Playoff, that was it. And I'm not saying that's wrong, and I'm not saying that you're any less of a fan for that, but it was. This was the year that they thought they could play in the national tournament, the national championship. And it just didn't work out that way. So fans, to me, Kevin, I'm not saying all fans, but the ones I've talked to, I would say half of them don't even know what bowl they're in, number one. And number two, they don't care. They don't even care if they win this game because it isn't the bowl that they wanted to be in, and they're in a great bowl. You know, if you look at it, now again, it's the flip side of Wisconsin. 10-2, that's a great college record. It's hard to win 10 games in college. And they did it, and they did it without any hype after they lost 2 early games. Penn State's still a good football team. Are they one of the top 4 teams? They very well could be. But you've brought it up a million times on this show, youngster. If you don't win, you tumble. You're out. You're done. Every game matters. That's why I love college football so much. You have to go out and win every week. There's no tomorrow. It's like a playoff game every week because of the rankings. So Penn State didn't take care of business twice. Cost them. Are they a good football team? Yeah, they're a very good football team, and that's why in Penn State land, yeah, it's great. You're going to a bowl game, but I would say, and maybe we'll put a poll out on Twitter. So if you're listening, go to @YoungsterOldMan. I'm going to do this, Kevin. I'm going to put out a poll. If you're a Penn State fan, do you care about the bowl game? It'll be interesting to see. Like I said, my short sample size of people I know in Western PA that are Penn State fans, 1, they don't know what game they're playing in. 2, they don't care. And it's not all of them, but it's a majority of them. That, yeah, they may watch it because they're a Penn State fan, but they don't care. The win and the loss do not matter at this point because it's not the national championship. That's all I got.
Yeah, and I'd agree wholeheartedly. And that's the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, that's a top-of-the-line bowl game. That's against number 11 Washington. You can say it's not top 10, but okay, you're playing a top 11 team. Fiesta Bowl, it's a big bowl game. But again, when it's championship or bust, I'm a Duke basketball fan. If you don't win the title, it's a disappointment. I don't care if they make it to the championship game and they lose. It's a disappointment. You're Duke. You win the title or it's a disappointment. That's just the way it is. I'm a Tennessee Titans fan. Expectations are a little different. It's not win Super Bowl or disappointment. If the Titans won their division and get to 10 wins and Marcus Mariota improves and the Titans get to the second round of the playoffs, that's great. I'm happy. And then you lose to the Steelers by 20 points, that's fine. That's a step in the right direction. I'm happy. This downward spiral that the Titans have been on, now I'm not happy as a Titans fan. But for where they were going, so expectations-wise, expectations, you have to be a realistic fan. And Penn State's realistic expectations were seriously to potentially win a national championship. That was realistic.
And I don't think, Kevin, that was out in cloud number 9. No. I really don't. That team was set up. They had a tough schedule. We talked about it. There was a couple of games in there that we said are going to be tough, and look what happened. But at the beginning of the year, I thought Penn State would be in the top 4. Yeah. That's how good of a team I thought they were. Before the season started, you look at it, and it was potentially who's the better team, Penn State, Ohio State, who's going to win that division, who's going to play Wisconsin, who's going to beat Wisconsin and go to the playoff. And that was the thought. That was the thought we had.
Yeah.
We thought it was Penn State because they had everything in the basket, and there's nothing wrong with that. You have those years where that expectation is that expectation, and it just didn't pan out. And then it's like at Christmas. We were just at Christmas. A little kid expecting a PlayStation, and they get an Atari, a vintage Atari that I grew up with. I would love it. This little kid's like, what is this? It's not a PlayStation. I don't want it. I know it's kind of a stupid analogy, but that's what it is. You kind of got a video game system, but not the one you wanted.
Right.
Or maybe I should use the real terms. Wanted Xbox, got a PlayStation. Well, it's not the Xbox. You got a PlayStation. Still got a video game console, just not the one you wanted. And I think that's where Penn State fans are.
Yeah, I like it. For next year, McSorley is a redshirt junior. Some places will say he's a senior because academically he's a senior, but he is a redshirt junior in terms of football. So he'll be back next year as long as he doesn't go pro, which I'm assuming he's not. But so in general, McSorley comes back. You're going to have a great quarterback.
That would be the wrong move with this quarterback class.
Yeah.
I mean, for him, how will his game equate to the professional level? We can talk about it more. Hopefully we'll have a whole year. If he does decide to go pro, then we'll talk about it quicker. But I think it would be the wrong move for him with the number of quarterbacks that are in this class. I wanted to throw that out there, that he should come back from a greedy player standpoint of improving his game to try and get drafted and go to the right situation. I don't think this year would be the right year for him to go out.
No, I would agree 100% on that. So you should have a really good quarterback at Penn State next year. You lose Saquon Barkley, obviously. That's going to hurt you in some ways. Tommy Stevens, the third leading rusher on the team behind Barkley and McSorley, will be coming back. That's potentially Penn State's next running back. But so in general, you're losing Barkley. You're losing your top wide receiver. You're losing your third and fourth wide receiver. You're losing some really good defensive pieces. Jason Kabinda, great player. Marcus Allen, great player. But you have talent returning, just like on offense. So you're losing a few really good guys all over the field, offense, defense. But you've got a lot of talent returning. Recruiting-wise, number 4 class in the country, 3 5-star players, 9 4-star players, top defensive end, number 3 wideout, number 2, halfback / wide receiver guy you want to call him. Number 4 tight end, number 8 tight end, number 6 defensive tackle. Point being, this team is going to reload. They are now basically, they're not what they were, in my opinion, pre-James Franklin, where it was like, hey, we're Penn State, so we'll get the number 20 recruiting class. No, now we're Penn State, we're getting the number 4 recruiting class. And I don't think that's something that's going to change a few years from now. I think Penn State is here to stay in the top 10 in terms of recruiting, which should lead to 9+ win seasons every year, even in the tougher Big Ten division that they're in, because you are losing guys like Barkley, but you're replacing them with the future Barkley. I mean, that's just what it is.
They've made elitist status when it comes to recruiting, and that's all on James Franklin. So you look at, we talked about that contract extension, and you need to do it. It's James Franklin. I know that before Franklin, when O'Brien was there, he brought him through the lean years of the banishment and all of that, and people will point the finger that he was the guy that kept the program alive. That's great. That's great. That's great. But James Franklin, that hire, I was a little skeptical, and I will say that. I didn't think James Franklin would do what he has done in his time there right now. But he has brought the recruiting stage to an elitist status. Now, he's also been taking that onto the field. And will Penn State have all of their eggs in a championship basket in a couple years? There very well could be that expectation. I don't think that you put that same expectation in the basket next year, but you look at what he's doing with this recruiting, and there are going to be those years, yes, where you again say it is championship playoffs or bust. I don't think you say it next year, but I think Franklin has done one heck of a job. That extension, the money he's getting paid, well-deserved for what he has done at Penn State to put him in that class of elite recruiting status. As you noticed there, youngster, I didn't put James Franklin into the class of elite coaches, but I put what he's done, Penn State, into the elitist recruiting status, because now the Penn State name means something when you go to a 4-star or 5-star recruit.
Yeah, obviously you can pull him in. He's showing that. I guess for Penn State going forward, like I said, this is a team now that is consistently going to be not necessarily in the top 10 consistently. Ohio State, you could make the argument is top 10 consistently, but they don't even finish the year necessarily top 10 every single year. But Penn State is they're above Wisconsin in terms of, just recruiting you can see. But that doesn't lead to necessarily success on the field. The Miami Hurricanes, for example, have had better recruiting classes than Wisconsin in the last 10 years. It doesn't mean the Miami Hurricanes are better than Wisconsin. And we're actually going to see Wisconsin and the Miami Hurricanes. I didn't even put those two together in my mind before thinking about that. But in general, recruiting doesn't mean everything, but it can cover up a lot of holes and can reboot your program a lot quicker when you lose a Saquon Barkley and you have a 5-star guy to just plug in there. It's a lot different when you have that luxury. So Penn State going forward, they're a juggernaut for sure. Next.
Well, I'm gonna add one comment here, Kevin, because you brought up a good point. If you noticed what I talked about before and about great college coaches, and I told you, and that's why I kind of said what I said. I haven't put James Franklin into great coaches because you have to equate that to success on the field. I mentioned with Ohio State, your identity can change based on the recruits. So here is James Franklin's task. He's got them to the elite recruiting level. I actually think his coaching has to change, not what he does X's and O's. You're dealing with egos now. You're not dealing with a very good high school football player that wants to play at the next level in Division I. You're dealing with prima donnas that are 5-star recruits, that guys that will cry when they don't get the ball, guys that will cry when you ask them to change positions. You go to a 3-star recruit, and I'm going to bring a guy up from Wisconsin. Many people may not even know this guy, Jim Leonard. Who the heck is Jim Leonard, right, Kevin? You may know Jim Leonard. He played safety for the Ravens for a little bit. Yeah. He was a great safety. But if you look at this kid, who the heck is Leonard? Nobody knows him. But now you give him 5-star ability and you say, okay, well, we've recruited you as a quarterback, but hey, guess what? We want you to play safety now. And I'm not saying that was Leonard. I just brought the name up because it's guys like that are 3-stars that just play hard and can make long NFL careers. But then you get a prima donna who's a quarterback and, oh, no, I'm only a quarterback. I'm not going to play safety, even though I could be a great safety because I got the skill. Or no, I'm not going to go play receiver. You've got a couple examples of Ohio State, guys that have moved to wide receiver that were quarterbacks.
Yep.
That's why I think Franklin's job right now just got 100 times tougher. And not, again, from the X's and O's, but it's from the player management standpoint. How can he handle the success of an elite recruiting status now dealing with prima donnas and egos? And I'm going to put most of those 5-star recruits in that category, Kevin. Even though, they're a great kid, they got this. You know what? They know they got talent. They know they got talent, and they want to play in the NFL. Now you're going to ask them to move positions, or you're not going to give them the ball as much? These kids are 18 and 19 years old. They have attitudes. They have opinions. They think they know what's going to do, the world is going to do for them. That's why I think his job just got tougher by having top 10 recruiting classes, by having 4- and 5-star recruits pounding on his door. How is he going to handle those guys? Because if you don't handle them right, it's not going to equate to W's. That's all I wanted to say about that. I don't know if you want to chime in there, but if not, we can move on to Bucky Badger.
I will for a second. Jimbo Fisher at Florida State put together a number of top 10 recruiting classes, had a bunch of success, and this past year his quarterback goes down week 1, and you see that team go 6-6. Obviously, with the quarterback healthy, they don't go 6-6, I don't think, but point is, things didn't go their way, and those 5-stars, 4-stars, it came up to a 6-6 season. Wisconsin, a bunch of 3-stars, basically, primarily almost all 3-stars, and they go 12-0 to start the year. I mean, so take a top 5 recruiting class for what it's worth, because if you don't have the coaching staff, the right guy leading the job, not to say that Jimbo Fisher wasn't doing a good job at Florida State, but you can have a down year, and it can be a complete downward spiral, and it leads to your firing. I mean, that can absolutely happen. So, yeah, expectations through the roof. That means your job gets harder. Not X's and O's, not throwing it up to a 6'5" receiver in the red zone. That part gets maybe a little easier. But as far as dealing with all the craziness that comes along with the success and hyping up all these 4 stars, saying we're Penn State, and yet you're going to be shoved down in the depth chart for a couple of years and you're not going to play till your junior year potentially, that can cause some headaches for recruits and the coaching staff. So excellent point by you. Moving on, Wisconsin, Miami, Orange Bowl, December 30th as well, 8 o'clock ESPN. So right after Penn State, Washington, we're going to get Wisconsin, Miami. Those will be 2 awesome football games in general, and this game's being played in Miami, interestingly enough, like we mentioned on last week's show, which if you want to check out our shows, by the way, for those still listening, thank you for still listening after an hour and a half. Check out thegruelingtruth.net. Again, follow our show on Twitter, at YoungsterOldMan. That's all one word. Follow Troy at TroyRobert967. Follow me at KIDCUNI. Follow us on Twitter. Follow The Grueling Truth. Check us out. We put together shows weekly about the Big Ten football, basketball season. Now that that's getting going, we're going to be primarily talking about basketball, I think, going forward. I'm sure we'll talk about, how these games went and everything, yada, yada, next week. But basically going forward, we're going to be talking a lot of basketball. So if you like Big Ten basketball, college basketball in general, again, check us out on Twitter. We post the show links on there. Check out thegruelingtruth.net. I'll finally move on. Wisconsin, Miami. Wisconsin, again, number 38 recruiting class, but they get guys for their system and they make them work. Just ask Jonathan Taylor. Alex Hornibrook can even have some success to some extent, and he can have not so much success in certain games, but in the end, a 12-0 season to start. You lose to Ohio State, so you're 12-1. You appear in the Orange Bowl. You're playing a top 10 team. Like you said, Troy, you as a Wisconsin fan, at the start of the year, if you're asked 12-1, Orange Bowl, you're not winning a national title, but you're Wisconsin, you're 12-1 playing in the Orange Bowl. You have to be fairly happy, even though, yes, you are disappointed that you were 1 win away, obviously, from getting in the college football playoff. But Wisconsin being 12-1, you can't ask for too much more as a Badgers fan.
Well, you're absolutely right, youngster. As a Wisconsin fan, I'm actually excited about this game. I know there's a lot of fans out there disappointed. Oh, we didn't make the national championship. You know what? I brought it up at the beginning of the show. You brought it up last week. If you would have told me, Kevin, in August that the Badgers would be 12-1 playing in the Orange Bowl, I would be like, hell yeah. Thank you very much, especially when I've said all year they don't have a quarterback. Now, I've never met Mr. Hornibrook. I've never sat down and conversed with him. But it was very apparent in that Ohio State game that Paul Chryst needs to make a change at quarterback, because there are going to be those situations where you have to put the ball in the quarterback's hands. And he just can't do it down the field. I'm going to throw it back to you real quick because I want to get your thought. 12-0, they did it with running. They did it with great defense. They did it by willing other teams into submission. That's what they did. You're not going to will an Ohio State, a Penn State, into submission. You've got to have a quarterback, Kevin, and correct me if I'm wrong. I know we talked about Barrett and his arm and his strength and his accuracy. But you got guys on the outside that can stretch the field. You got to take a shot downfield. You got to be able to stretch the field and get guys out of the box. If you look at Hornibrook's numbers, people say, well, look at his numbers. He was pretty efficient. He was pretty effective. He was effective within 10 yards. And he had a very good tight end. That's all you got to do, and all you had to do to shut down the Wisconsin passing attack, shut down Hornibrook to tight end. That's all you had to do. That is all Wisconsin could do. Hornibrook could not spread the field. His deep ball, he tried once in a while, but you didn't really have to respect it, Kevin. That's why I'm saying Chris needs to make a change. He's got to get a quarterback that you have to at least respect the deep ball and maybe get a receiver that has a little bit of speed that can run a deep route and you can connect on it once or twice. I think once or twice is all Wisconsin connected on a deep route all year. But I'm talking once or twice in a game. Now, I could be off my rocker and I can just be an old man sitting on this rocking chair, but you have to have a quarterback who can spread the field and can throw the ball that intermediate distance and the deep distance to keep the defense honest. Otherwise, the likes of an Ohio State, or let's say Wisconsin would have beat Ohio State, because they did outscore them in the second half. I mean, they were in that game for 30 minutes, just the wrong 30 minutes. But what if they would have won and been in the playoff? Did they stand a chance against those defenses that can shut down the run and you're going to put the ball in Hornibrook's hands? I'm actually more excited about this bowl game because the Badgers have a chance to win. I don't think they would have had a chance to win in the national playoff due to quarterback play. So I want to get your thought there, youngster. Quarterback, how important is it to have a quarterback that can throw the intermediate route and throw a good deep ball to stretch the defense?
I could talk another hour and a half, Troy, about how important quarterbacks are. But just in general, I mean, you can think of it this way. Wisconsin went 12-0, and they were in kind of an 8-team playoff. We knew who the 6, 7 or so teams who were left fighting to get into the Final Four. Wisconsin was one of those teams. Ohio State was one of those teams. Wisconsin was in its own little playoff, just an extended playoff. You had to beat Ohio State. Then you had to probably beat a team like Clemson. Then you had to beat a team probably like Georgia or Oklahoma or Alabama. They were in the playoff. I mean, you win and you advance. Your end in sight is the national championship. It's right there. You have to beat 3 really good teams back to back to back. Ohio State had to do the same thing. They had to beat Wisconsin convincingly, apparently. And then you'd have to beat another 2 elite teams. Could they do that with Barrett? I don't think so. But in general, I mean, Ohio State was right there. They couldn't get it done fashionably enough, I don't think, to vault themselves ahead of Alabama for that number 4 spot. But Wisconsin was right there. You know, they were in the playoff just like the other 6 or 7 teams that had a shot at making the quote-unquote college football playoff of the Final Four. They were right there. So I just wanted to make that point clear that it's like, well, Wisconsin didn't make the playoff. It's like, actually, realistically, they were right there. They put the first 12 games of the season and said, we're in our own playoff. We win, we advance. And the national championship is 3 games away. We're 3 games away, 3 wins away from hoisting a trophy, saying we're the best team in college football. I mean, they were right there, literally. So for me, that's what I take from Wisconsin season. You lose 1 game. I think any reasonable Wisconsin fan could have said, yeah, we can lose 1 game in the schedule. We should be favored probably in every game going into 2017, but if we lost 1, wouldn't shock me. They lost 1. That's okay. So, yeah, Orange Bowl against the top 10 team, 12-1 season. You can't cry about it. That's my take on it. 2018 as well, I wanted to talk about this. Their schedule at Iowa, at Michigan, at Northwestern, at Penn State. You don't have a bunch of necessarily cupcakes in there. I think those are all losable games at Iowa, at Michigan, at Northwestern, at Penn State. So Wisconsin's schedule gets a little harder. There's no Ohio State. There's no Michigan State, I guess, if I'm looking at this correctly. So Wisconsin, their schedule gets a little harder next year to navigate and go 12-0 through. But like you said, Troy, I mean, this team's going to have a really good defense. You're going to have Jonathan Taylor back as a sophomore. So this team's going to be built the same way. Can Hornibrook go on the road at Iowa, at Michigan, at Northwestern, at Penn State, and beat all those teams and go 12-0, get to the Big Ten championship game, and have a shot?
Nope.
Right.
Say it now. Interrupted you to say nope.
Yeah. So, is a quarterback change necessary? Maybe. I mean, if he doesn't get drastically better for next year, what's going to change? Your running game, your defense, it's going to be top-notch again, I'm sure. But if Hornibrook doesn't get better, the schedule gets harder next year. You have to win 4 games that are absolutely losable. This year, there were probably like 2, realistically. I think they played at Northwestern, which was losable. And you're going to have close games being Wisconsin, but really at Northwestern, and they played Michigan. Those games were losable. But Wisconsin got past those. But 4 kind of harder road games in the Big Ten, that's with average quarterback play, that's going to be tough to win through and say, hey, we've got a shot at making the college football playoffs. So unless he's drastically better, I agree with you. They need a quarterback change. And is a 3-star quarterback going to come in and be better than Hornibrook as a junior? I mean, I guess that's the question. What I guess, would you bench Hornibrook if he shows basically no real progression in the offseason? Would you bench him? Would you start a freshman? What would you do, I guess, in charge of Wisconsin, knowing you've got a top 5 running game, top 5 defense, but you need a quarterback who can make plays? Because, yes, to beat 3 elite teams in a row in the Big Ten title game and college football semis and finals, you got to beat 3 elite teams back to back to back every year if you're Wisconsin to win a national title. So you need that quarterback. And if Hornibrook's not that guy, do you bench him for someone who maybe can be? Maybe you mold that guy, maybe you get that guy experience because you know Hornibrook as a junior just isn't going to get it done.
Well, I want to first applaud you for mentioning national championship in Wisconsin in the same breath. They're still not at that level, Kevin.
Yeah.
They're not going to be until they get a quarterback.
Right.
I said this. I said it to you. We were talking about it. Can you imagine if Barrett was on Wisconsin? And Barrett's not even the best quarterback in the Big Ten. But can you imagine if Barrett was on Wisconsin's roster? They might have been at some point the number 1 ranked team in the country. Because at least Barrett has a resemblance. He may not be the most accurate guy, may not have the best deep ball, but he can get the ball out there. And he can make plays with his legs. Have you seen Hornibrook run?
No.
You have. No, I know you have. He's not breaking any land speed records.
Right. He's
not eluding tacklers. He's not using athleticism to extend the chains. I mean, he has scrambled. He's a guy that's going to rely on play action. My problem is what happens when you shut down Taylor. We found out against Ohio State he couldn't get the job done. Is he going to make a leap from a sophomore year to a junior year and all of a sudden be able to throw a deep ball? No. You can work on it. I know you can, but your arm strength, how are you improving your arm strength?
Yeah.
You can go and lift weights and do these things. That's still not going to improve that arm strength. It's in technique. It's in what you do. It's in all those other little things that quarterbacks do. Hornibrook is Hornibrook. We know what we got. If you don't have anybody else on the roster, then so be it. But Paul Chryst, if he wants Wisconsin to make that jump, he's got to find a quarterback. And it's tough. I mean, because here's the thing with Wisconsin. And, man, this show just it extended. We joked it's going to go 2 hours, and it's going to.
Yeah.
But this is something I've said for years upon years. They got a gift with Russell Wilson. They got a gift. I mean, I don't know how that happened. But, man, what a privilege to watch him play at Wisconsin. But he was also a grad student. He was a transfer. He wasn't a recruit to Wisconsin. If I'm a recruit, Kevin, even if I'm a 4-star pro-style quarterback, why would I go to Wisconsin to not throw the ball 25 times a game? You have a great quarterback. Chris still is not going to want to throw the ball 20 times a game. Unlike my magical 20 number where I said if Hornibrook has to throw it 20 times, they lose. That's normal. That's Paul Chryst. You're a quarterback in his system, you're going to throw the ball 18 times a game. You're not going to throw it 25 or 30. If I'm a quarterback trying to showcase my talents, that egotistical prima donna 5-star recruit, why would I not want to throw the ball 25 times? Why do I only want to throw the ball 18 times? It will be impossible for Chris to recruit a guy out of high school that has that ability because of the fact of the system they play. Because if I'm a good quarterback, why am I going to, and I'm air quoting, why am I going to digress my talent to a Wisconsin program and only throw the ball 18 times a game? I don't know if that made sense, but it's something I have thought about ever since Russell Wilson left, and people said, well, why can't they recruit a quarterback like that? They can't because of what I just said. What are your quick thoughts?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I guess I could take this show another hour just with Wisconsin and its program and what it means to be Wisconsin. And, yeah, you can want to be Wisconsin and want to have a top 5 running game and a top 5 defense. And I'm not going to kind of ask for an answer for this because, again, we could talk Wisconsin football for much longer than 2-3 hours. But in general, I mean, yeah, you have those guys, but like you said, it comes down to a 4-star quarterback, and you put it at 25 attempts a game. And realistically, if you're going to a Big 12 school or you're going out west, you're slinging the ball 30, 35 times a game. It's a lot different throwing it 35 times on the West Coast compared to 18 when it's 18 degrees in Wisconsin. I mean, it's just – so you're not going to get those guys. Maybe once every 5-6 years you'll get a 4-star humbled kid who just loves Wisconsin, and you get lucky, and that's your guy, and maybe that's when you strike it big, and you have a 2-3 year window when you can win a national title. Maybe that's what a team like Wisconsin hopes for, and maybe that's the best they can do. Or should it all be for naught, and maybe you need to design a program that's not so heavily built on the run. But at the same time, if you do that, do you become Northwestern and Iowa and Purdue, and you don't have that identity? And you can't – so I guess I don't know what the answer is. And, again, I'm not going to ask you, I guess, to break down Wisconsin football and should it be built this way, even though you can get 10, 11-win seasons. But at the same time, if you don't have elite quarterback play, you can't win back-to-back-to-back games against 3 elite teams in a row to win a national title. So should you be happy with 12-1 and never think about, really – pushing for a national title unless you do get one of those lucky recruits who just loves Wisconsin and is a 4-star quarterback and who can sling the ball all over the field but chooses not to go to a school where he throws it 35 times but he throws it 18. I don't know what the realistic expectations are, I guess.
We just need to wait 18 years until J.J. Watt or T.J. Watt have a kid. Because that kid, and they better train him to be a quarterback. Yeah, that kid will go to Wisconsin. Right. It's got to be a Watt brother, and it's got to be one of their children, and they've got to groom him to be a quarterback. So maybe in 18 years, that's if they have a child this year. So maybe in 20 years, there'll be a quarterback that is a superstar athlete that can sling it around the field, like you said, Kevin, that is just bleeds red and white, Wisconsin Badger colors, and that would be a T.J. Watt or a J.J. Watt child. So I'm being sarcastic. But, yeah, I'm glad you're not going to ask me to go in depth because, like you said, I could probably sit here until about 10 o'clock tonight and talk about everything that Wisconsin could and cannot do. So let's move on. We've got one game left. Try to keep her under 2 hours. Yeah.
In general, though, I want to finish with this. You lose Fumagalli as your tight end for Wisconsin next year. That's going to hurt. But your top 4 wideouts outside of Fumagalli were sophomores and freshmen. So Hornibrook's going to grow to some extent. Losing Fumagalli will hurt, but your top 4 receivers outside of that are just going to get older. They should get better, stronger. Defensively, you lose some talent for sure, but there's a number of juniors that I just plucked out of the roster on the computer and said, yep, those guys are going to be seniors. They'll be back. This Wisconsin defense running game going to be strong. But again, it all comes down to Hornibrook winning those 4 really good games on the road next year. If you go unscathed, that's great, but the likelihood of it with an average quarterback is just hard to do. Michigan going on finally. Michigan on, I believe it is January 1st, if I'm not mistaken. They are playing, I think it is South Carolina. Let me make sure. Michigan Outback Bowl, January 1st against South Carolina in the state of Florida. That is on noon. That is at noon on ESPN2, January 1st, 2018. Michigan this year, in general, I mean, Michigan football, you can look at it and say it was kind of a down year because you went 8-4, and you're Michigan, and you're getting top 10 recruiting classes with Harbaugh, and you're talking about lifetime extensions with Harbaugh, And so is 8-4 good enough? No, it's not. If you're a Michigan fan, you even beat Indiana in overtime, and you still go 8-4. You lose to Michigan State, you lose to Penn State, you lose to Wisconsin, you lose to Ohio State. When is Michigan going to turn that corner with Harbaugh and beat those top teams and be in a Big Ten championship game and win it and go to a college football playoff? They haven't done it with Harbaugh. That's absolutely the next step. And for next year, I guess, again, it comes down to quarterback play. Wilton Spate saying he's going to transfer. O'Korn's a senior. Brandon Peters, a redshirt freshman, had limited time. You saw some potential, but is he the guy going forward? We talked about Shea Patterson a week ago, the guy from Ole Miss, transferring, coming in. I would assume he's going to be able to play, just based on what Ole Miss has going down at Ole Miss. But this team has also Dylan McCaffrey, I believe his name is, his first name. I know McCaffrey's last name for sure. He's a quarterback from last year's class who redshirted, didn't play. This team has some answers at quarterback, and if Shea Patterson's the guy under center next year at Michigan, that's going to be a real offense because you have your top 2 returning running backs coming back. You have at least your top 6 wide receivers coming back. You had a young defense this year. You're still returning a majority of those guys next year. This is going to be a real team, especially if Shea Patterson is their quarterback. McCaffrey even could be the quarterback. He was a highly touted guy. I think if this team figures out its quarterback position, which I think they will one way or another, Michigan's going to be pretty dangerous next year. In general, number 14 class, you get 7 4-stars. It's a good recruiting class for sure, but it's going to come down to quarterback play. And if you have the quarterback play that Michigan had this past year, you're going to see 8-4, 9-3. If you have Shea Patterson being a number 1 quarterback recruit like he was a few years ago, and he's going to be Michigan's guy next year, if that's the case, or if McCaffrey turns up and becomes a legitimate quarterback next year for you, year 1, being able to play, then Michigan's going to be a really tough team to beat. But again, it all comes down to quarterback play because the defense, the running game, just like at Wisconsin, it's going to be there for Michigan next year.
Well, people will argue, Kevin, that defense didn't play up to its expectations, and I'm going to tell you something.
Yeah.
You have to point the finger at the offense. When you go 3 and out and you got to put your defense right back on the field, or you run 5 plays and you have a turnover, that defense has to go right back on the field. Doesn't matter how good your defense is. It's the same in the game, any football game that you watch. If your offense doesn't sustain drives and you keep putting your defense back on the field, they're going to get beat. It's the way it works. And that was the problem this year, is that offensively, Michigan was not very effective. And you look at Wisconsin, and I'll point this. Can anybody out there listening in, and I want to keep this under 2 hours, but anybody listening in, this great Wisconsin defense, Kevin, and you probably can, so maybe it's not the right question, but can you name anybody on that defense that is an All-American, that is a guy that everybody in the world is talking about because he's a great defensive player?
For Wisconsin?
Yeah, you probably can, because we follow the Big Ten. I said it sarcastically. The answer is no. The college football fan is not naming all of the guys on the Wisconsin defense because they're great.
Right.
Because they're not 5-star recruits. But part of their success, Kevin, is the offense Wisconsin runs.
Yep.
They control the clock. They win the time of possession battle. That defense goes and makes a stop. Then they go on the sideline, they grab a Gatorade cup, they go sit on the bench and say, okay, we can sit down for 20 minutes. Because it's about 20 minutes game when you're looking at drives, or 10 minutes. We can go sit down, we can take a drink, we can order a pizza because Wisconsin's going to move the chains. And they get to rest. So they're fresh. When you're turning the ball over and not getting first downs, you barely get to the sideline, then you got to turn around because your team's already punting the ball. That can hurt a defense. I don't care how good you are. You're right back on the field, emotionally and physically. It is tough when that happens. I think that was a big reason that Michigan defense didn't play up to par this year. They were asked to be on the field so much and to ask to make so many big plays that the offense didn't do their job for Michigan. And if you have a quarterback that can do the job and sustain drives and put points on the board, that defense just got 10 times better. That's all I have, Kevin. I know we're right around 2 hours. Holy cow. I said to you before the show, let's try to keep this an hour. Try to keep it an hour. And then you say, I got some points. I got some points. 2 hours later, I am tuckered out. I am tuckered out from talking, but I thought it was a great show.
Yes, and I've got one more point. We have talked about this a couple times, making the comparison. This will be my last thing. Wisconsin and the Jacksonville Jaguars, and just this past week, it's amazing this NFL season, how the Jaguars basically all of a sudden have the best defense in the NFL. That's coming off Blake Bortles throwing about half the interceptions he did a year ago, which, again, talking about turnovers, field possession, time of being on the field if you're a defense. And they also drafted Leonard Fournette, who has over 1,000 rushing yards and however many touchdowns. So if you're playing that type of way, of ground and pound and don't turn the ball over, and your defense only sees the field so often, it's amazing how this year the Jaguars have this unbelievable elite defense. It's amazing when you get a running game and your quarterback doesn't turn the ball over, how that happens. And the Dallas Cowboys, how last year they control the game and lead the NFL in time of possession, and Dak Prescott can look like an MVP, just like Hornibrook did. At times, Hornibrook would complete 70% of his passes and play almost perfect football for the system he was in. And it's exactly like how Dak Prescott was a year ago. And Blake Bortles isn't playing to that level this year, but he's got the same makeup of a top running game, a top defense. That's what Michigan should have next year. That's what Wisconsin had this year. But in the end, Hornibrook couldn't get it done against a top-flight defense in Ohio State. And if you're Michigan and you have a Shea Patterson coming in and can throw the ball over the field to go along with a top defense, a top running game, the sky's the limit. For Michigan, the sky's the limit for Wisconsin. It just comes down to quarterback play. So I had to get that comparison out there one last time, that it's like in the NFL. It's not all that different. If you control the game on the ground and you don't give up the ball turnover-wise, you just need a quarterback who is able to throw the ball on the outside, throw the ball deep, and the sky's the limit no matter what level of football you're playing.
Great point, youngster. And man, like I said, I can feel it. I can feel it in my voice. My voice is just about done. 2 hours. 2 hours of great conversation. If you're still listening at this point, thank you very much. Find me on Twitter at TroyRobert967. Find the youngster at KidCunny, KIDCUNI. And definitely make sure you follow our show handle at Youngster Old Man, one word. Thanks for listening in. We'll put together another show next week, recapping all of the bowl games because they'll all be done next week, Kevin. That will be our last Big Ten football show. Hope you join us next week, folks. Enjoy your week. Happy New Year.